All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I know some people are still trickling in, and that is perfectly fine. Welcome back. Welcome to the second block of the 37th Annual Eudora Welty Writers Symposium. Again, with a few friendly reminders before we get started. Of course, to turn off your cell phones or to please silence them for the readings. And if you need to come and go or enter and exit, please do so quietly, as there will be readings going on and Q&As after each of the authors. Be mindful of where you're sitting and your belongings, to take with you anything that belongs to you and to keep the seats clean if you were to have bottled water, etc. Don't leave any of it behind. Also, in the programs, there are evaluations, single sheets that you can pull out. Please fill those out, and you can leave them in the box that is on the round table right outside of the front door here in the lobby. Also to remind you of other Welty series events that are going on, such as at Summer Hall, the Welty Art Exhibit, which is the theme of it is Intersections of Gender and Place, featuring Allison Grant, Nia Campbell, and Sarah Oden. And lastly, some thank yous are very much in order for this event. The Welty series events are financially assisted by a grant from the Robert M. Herron Foundation. The Eudora Welty Writers Symposium is an annual production of the College of Arts and Sciences, the Department of Languages, Literature, and Philosophy, and the Low Residency MFA in Creative Writing. We also wish to express our deep gratitude to the Commercial Dispatch, the Spectator, the Columbus Convention and Visitors Bureau, and local businesses such as Emily Liner at Friendly City Books, as well as others who help to publicize the Welty series events. We also wish to thank the Department of Music, University Relations, Resources Management, Sodexo, and Barnes & Noble for all of their assistance in having this and hosting us here. So thanks to all of them. And now I turn things over to this afternoon's moderator, MFA faculty member, Mary Miller.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to see so many of you. Is Robert Busby. Robert Busby was born in Tupelo and raised in Pontotoc. A graduate MFA in fiction from Florida International University. Along the way, worked as a bandsaw operator, bookseller, prep cook, produce clerk, teacher, and satellite TV technician. His debut collection, Bodock Stories, is set in the fictitious town of Bodock in Clay Gardner County, Mississippi, during the 1994 Mid-South ice storm. It was published this June and received the C. Michael Curtis Short Story Book Prize. Kirkus Reviews calls the collection devastatingly precise. Maurice Carlos Ruffin says that Bodock presents a universe of experience filled with darkness, humor, and desire, and leaves no feeling untouched. Busby lives in Memphis with his wife, 2 kids, a plot hound, and a shepherd terrier mix. He's recently completed a literary crime novel that is also set during the 1994 Mid-South ice storm. Welcome to the stage, Robert Busby.
Good afternoon, y'all. Thanks, Mary, for that introduction. I am very honored to be here for the Eudora Welty Writers Symposium. Thank y'all for inviting me. I had something I was going to say here at the beginning, and now I'm like, hold on just a second, let me catch up on my notes. So I was, when I saw the theme for this year's symposium, secrets and revelations. I've found like as my collection has been out, I've sort of like noticed, somebody was, I think Kathleen was talking about motifs in the morning session, and I've sort of like noticed patterns in the stories, and kind of realized with this theme that I hadn't really thought about how much like the plots of many of these stories rely on like the revelation of some secret or several secrets, and like the reversal in the story, the plot of the story sort of like hinges on the exposure of like that secret. It wasn't intentional, and I hadn't thought about it until this symposium. I was also I was reading Losing Battles in preparation for this, and was I feel like I have to acknowledge the number of times that the word Bodock was also used in that book, which I guess was appropriate. But anyway, so I'm going to read from a story today called "Steer Away from That Darkness." This is actually also the first, or I'm going to read this story is, part of this story is the first chapter of the crime novel that I've written as well. And depending on like how well I've like estimated how long it'll take to read this, or how not well, I may end up like reading some more into the story. I was trying to estimate and time myself last night doing that, and stayed up way later than I should have. So, but anyway, without further ado, here's Steer Away from That Darkness. Bradley steered his Chevy S10 through the dark to the back of the Campbell property to drop off the deer. He saw Wayne back there discussing something into a cordless phone, pacing across the open-aired shed where deer and other game were processed. I forgot to look at my watch to see what time I started. Hold on. In a past life, the processing plant had been an abattoir where ancient Campbells of only a slightly better economic circumstance had possessed actual hogs to butcher. Now it was a front for a meth business that Peach Campbell had begun before Wayne hijacked it. A single light shone off the back of the plant and elongated Wayne's shadow up the front of the camper. Bradley reversed toward the shed, then killed the ignition and stepped out of the small pickup to unload the deer from the truck bed. "Sup, boss," he said. Wayne held up his hand. Bradley didn't know how long he'd be, so he lit up a Newport and leaned against the back of the truck. 24 and still acne-prone, a blonde chunk in his Atlanta Falcons starter jacket, had done nothing but gain weight since he'd started the morning shift at Hardee's when he moved out of the house at 17. Before he took to running meth, the steady job barely covered Bradley's bills each month, which meant he would have been kneading biscuits about 5 years and 50 more after that before he could save up for community college. He didn't know what he wanted to be yet. He just knew he didn't want to be here. In the back of the truck was Bradley's climbing tree stand that had rattled across the bed the whole way here, banging its welded aluminum against the metal walls of the truck bed, occasionally thumping into the flesh of a buck that Bradley had scooped off the side of the road. A car had busted the deer up something good, but the deer had probably gotten a few good punches. In the morning, someone would be getting their hood or windshield or bumper repaired. Bradley hadn't cut into the deer yet to see how bad the damage was. One of the antlers had broken off, though. Would have been a 6-point otherwise, but the deer would still serve a purpose. Its meat would be broken down a few yards away in the plant, then wrapped around baggies of meth and stored in the old vertical freezer in the shed, all of it packaged in marked boxes on Wednesday, 2 days from now, and driven by Bradley to a kosher butcher shop in Memphis in the back of Peach's refrigerator truck, parked up at the house. Wayne flicked a cigarette off into the dirt and searched the cordless for the talk button to end the call. Then he ducked in the camper, and Bradley saw him saying something to Peach's sister Lori, who lived in the RV. Wayne emerged with a store-brand Coke and beeline to the passenger side of the truck, carrying what looked like a 10-gallon white bucket by a thin metal handle. "What's that?" Bradley said, over the truck hood. Wayne grabbed at the passenger seat to open the passenger door. Dwayne set the bucket in the middle on what they called the bitch seat and set his bony ass in shotgun and closed the door. It was obvious Dwayne wanted Bradley to take him somewhere, but Bradley had never been alone with Dwayne, had boy dodging his drunk, abusive father. His head filled with thoughts and his chest got so heavy he believed his heart had stopped. "Where are we going?" Bradley asked. "With Sugarin on the phone. Said we got us a situation out at the lab." Bradley sat still for what felt like a damn eternity. He had been happy enough to keep poaching for Dwayne, same as he had for Peach. But unlike Peach and Sugarin, who manned the lab when Dwayne wanted to get with Peach's sister, Bradley didn't cook at all. So he had never had a reason to go out to any of the labs and wondered what the reason was now. Bradley had been using their contact in Memphis to procure some Vicodin to deal for himself. Not even dealing really, because he only had one customer. But now Dwayne had found out somehow. Bradley was sure of it. "You gonna crank it up and run us out there? Or are you gonna crank it up or run us out there like fucking Fred Flintstone?" Should we unload the deer first?" Bradley thinking if he could just get Dwayne out of the truck, maybe get Dwayne's arms full of broke gut deer, he could just take off running, his fat ass panting through the woods. "No," Dwayne said. Bradley nodded. "All right." He thought about just making a run for it anyway, but wouldn't get far. Peach had told him how Dwayne had snuck up on their previous mule and done him in. Dwayne wouldn't have much trouble doing the same to Bradley with or without a head start. He realized now that it had taken him too long to recognize that. He was a sitting duck next to Dwayne. He finally caught a grip on the key, and when the ignition turned over, he damned the dependability of his truck, the certainty that it would start and carry him to the gallows. Dwayne sniffed and leaned toward Bradley and sniffed again. "Them damn Newports you smoking?" Yeah." Dwayne had already pulled one Winston from the pack in his shirt pocket and removed another now. The shirt was flannel and unbuttoned, and the loose t-shirt underneath fell against a body deprived of all fat, just bone and muscle and tendon like spring-loaded traps. He tucked both cigarettes between his thin lips, cupped his hand around the lighter flame, touched it to each Winston. His arms were lean, but the hand that offered Bradley one of the lit cigarettes was as wide as a shovel head. "I can't smell that menthol shit all the way out there," Dwayne said. Bradley accepted the Winston, trying not to think about those Looney Tunes where they gave Bugs Bunny a last cigarette as he faced a firing squad. At the least, Dwayne wouldn't shoot while Bradley was driving. He pondered different plans of escape for when they arrived at the lab, really just different versions of the same plan, hauling ass by foot or tire in the opposite direction of Dwayne. The radio quietly murmured something about a cold front coming through in a couple of days. Bradley stole a glance at the label on the lid of the bucket. Phosphorus, red, 99%. "It's safe to smoke around that?" Bradley asked. "I wouldn't use it as an ashtray." 15 minutes later, on the other side of the county, Dwayne told Bradley where to turn off County Road 211. Told Bradley to kill his headlights. With only the red tinge of the running lights to see by, the dirt path got swallowed in the moonless dark. Bradley slowed to navigate the fire road, which in its long disuse had grown a long tuft of grass, like a mohawk between two lines of dirt that also sprouted patches of grass. The whole way, Bradley had pondered a lot about how he could create a diversion using the red phosphorus. The big obstacle, of course, actually getting the bucket open without Dwayne noticing. "I ain't never been out here before," Bradley said. "Just follow the lines. Steer clear of the darkness." "All right." Then, trying to gauge what his own future looked like, Bradley said, "Y'all gonna be ready for me to run this batch up to Memphis? You in a rush or something?" "No." "Stop at the gate." Bradley wasn't looking and had to slam the brakes before he barreled through a wall of kudzu stretching across the path. Dust coughed into the vines. Dwayne got out. Bradley looked for a flathead screwdriver to pry open the lid like on a paint can. All he found was a bicentennial quarter. Through the windshield, he saw Dwayne with his arms elbow deep in the kudzu wall. He tried to open the red phosphorus, but as a lever and fulcrum, the quarter and the bucket rim both sucked ass. From the vines, Dwayne pulled a chain, and Bradley watched the wall of vines break from the Bodock tree on the left side of the path and wobble toward the truck. He saw that the kudzu disguised a rectangular gate that had been fashioned out of 2 wood pallets together. The hinges must have been affixed to another tree on the right side of the path. Bradley had the idea to use the keys in the ignition to pry open the phosphorus, but just as Dwayne waved Bradley through, Dwayne closed the gate behind the truck. Then did Bradley realize that he had missed the head start staring right at him. For a whole minute, Dwayne had not actually been sitting in the truck. Another 200 yards, they reached the lab, the outline of an abandoned double-wide, stilted on cinder blocks and rotting away at the edge of the hollow. The path went out from under the truck, and Bradley parked in some flattened blue-stem grass. In the dark, Bradley thought again about the fate of the drug mule who had preceded him. Ludicrously early one morning, Sugarin, instead of Peach, had been shit-faced at the processing plant when Bradley dropped off another deer. Sugarin had spilled all about it. 5 months ago, Joe had died when the previous lab exploded. Joe had been the only one cooking that night, and they all would have considered it an accident, except that when Peach got out there to relieve Joe the next morning, all he found was some dude taking a piss on his smoldering ashes, a semi-automatic M4 Bushmaster slung over his shoulder. Peach had told Sugarin how this dude had his shirt pulled up over his nose and mouth, and in the navy blue of early dawn, he could see only those eyes devoid of any emotion, just some kind of depraved apathy watching Peach. He shook off and zipped up, walked towards Peach, said his name was just Dwayne, and that Memphis had sent him to shape up their little outfit. He started spouting all this chemistry that Peach didn't understand, but he caught the gist of it. Dwayne was taking over. If Peach didn't like it, well, look at Joe's crispy fried corpse there. Now Bradley was sewn to the cloth seat with fear. He butchered the recitation of the only prayer he knew. Then a flash of bright light filled the cab, and Bradley's whole shitty, lonely life blurred before him. The half-siblings he didn't know because he hadn't stuck around after his mom got knocked up by someone in his own high school class, and the single wide where he slept now with the lights on so wood roaches wouldn't crawl across his face. Field of study he hadn't chosen yet. But then he heard Dwayne stepping out of the truck, pulling the bucket. Felt an audible sigh of relief. A small circle warmed his boxer out, but not enough to dampen his pants or his jeans. Outside the truck, Dwayne lit another smoke. The trailer was covered in kudzu that seemed to be digesting the prefab house back into the earth. Even during the day, Bradley imagined the trailer difficult to spot. Not that this neck of woods got much traffic anyway. Peach was still sitting. Where's Sugarin? Told him to fetch you after we got off the payphone. And Dwayne said, honestly, don't give a shit what you told Sugarin. And Pete shrugged apologetically at Bradley. He and Bradley went way back to middle school. Peach had landed this gig for Bradley, Dwayne needing a new runner after he barbecued the last one. Before his part, Peach had tried to keep Bradley from this side of the operation. Dwayne, the scientist, Peach and Sugarin, the sous chefs, and Bradley just muling the product to and its ingredients back from Memphis. He stood at the hood of his truck, still coming down off of his scare. Between Peach and the trailer was a bare area of earth where the blue stem had been cut and burned. A propane tank set beneath a two-eye camp stove in the dirt. On each his jittery hands to pick a Newport from the pack and steady it between his quivering lips to grease sulfur that hung about the place, the stench of boiling alcohol and cold medicine. I watched him work his words up out of an underbite that gave the false impression of a strong chin. Been reduced, Dwayne said. Huh? Nah, Dwayne, there's something else. He wore a nylon coverall used for crawling beneath houses that crinkled as he led them to the rear of his '83 Cavalier where a three-wheeler that Bradley was pretty sure didn't belong to Peach had been parked. In the tall, wet grass next to the three-wheeler lay an old man tied up and gagged, his wrists and ankles bound with rope. Dwayne said, well, that's unfortunate. We heard him riding his way on that three-wheeler, so we ducked and hid. Sugarman waited behind that tree over there and knocked his geezer ass off his three-wheeler as he rode up. "Do you say anything?" He complained about his breaking his ribs or something. He said he owned this land. Dwayne nodded and smirked. "Found yourself some trouble, didn't you, old-timer?" Dwayne kicked the man's Velcro shoes, which flopped lifeless in the grass. Bradley tasted a sick in his throat when he realized he was about to pay witness to whatever fate Dwayne had in store for the pathetic geezer bound and gagged in the tall, wet grass. Dwayne said, "He don't say much." Peach popped the trunk on the Cavalier, pulled out a single-shot rifle where it lay atop the spare tire. "Here's the gun. We can pop him and bury him off somewhere." "Nah, last thing we need is something that looks like a murder or missing persons. Cops swarming this place, county going on lockdown or some shit. Dwayne mulled over something. Bring me that ether." Peach returned with a plastic jug labeled starter fluid and a gas mask over his face. "Give me your shirt," Dwayne said. "I ain't got another one." "Not even at your house?" Peach sighed and unzipped his coverall and pulled his arms out of the sleeves. Dwayne had pulled on a pair of rubber gloves, squatted, and held the t-shirt over the mouth of the jug. He tipped the container so only a small section of the shirt soaked up the fluid. Then he turned the old man over, and as the body rolled out from under the truck, Dwayne pressed the t-shirt against the man's swollen, veined nose before they saw why the body hadn't been making much noise. Hell, this sumbitch done croaked already. 6 hours later, Bradley pulled into a rob-a-lot, a two-pump Amoco out on a stretch of old Highway 6. The hour was still dark except for false dawn on the horizon and the fluorescent lamp in the awning above the pumps humming and flickering, barely strobing its light over an empty lot. No other light between the pumps and the store, which made it an easy target for holdups, burglars following the shadows, to make it inside the store before the Syrian cashier could push the alarm. Bradley left the lab about 3 hours ago after Dwayne had boiled up a plan for disposing of the colonel's dead body. Bradley had only had a couple of hours to sleep, but he had been too wired, his mind's eye playing on a loop the way the old man's body flopped over lifeless and the tall, wet grass when Peach went to loop a safety orange hunting vest around the colonel's dead arms. So when Bradley arrived home, he just kept on his black slacks and Nike high tops and the red Hardee's polo he had been wearing during his shift yesterday morning and brewed a cup of coffee, figuring he'd just make an all-nighter out of it. Now he parked on the dark side of the gas station, avoiding the lights until he reached the payphone in front of the store. He dropped in a quarter and dialed the number to the sheriff's station, which he'd copied onto his arm in ballpoint ink from the phone book the county had thrown against the door of his trailer a year ago. And while the line rang 4 times, Bradley inspected his hands where the blood had dried from wherein he carved the deer according to Peach's instructions, so that the carcass looked less like roadkill and more like coyotes had gotten a hold of it. Then Bradley helped Peach load the deer onto the back rack of the three-wheeler, as well as his own tree stand and the old man's rifle. Dwayne had been helping Peach set the colonel on the seat, holding the limp body upright while Peach mounted the three-wheeler behind the old man when Bradley pulled away from the scene. The operator, a male voice, came on and stirred Bradley from the nightmare. For a moment, instead of calling in the report the way Peach had told him to, that Bradley had been on his way to work and saw some old bastard slumped in a tree stand at the edge of a big field and got out to check on him and reckoned he was probably dead, Bradley contemplated telling the operator the truth and then just hightailing himself out of Bodock for good. But that was just a hope he latched onto in order to keep from sinking. Right now, looking off into the darkness as if on some quick stop on the moon, he felt that even if he could make it all the way to Mars, where he could stare off in a direction opposite this strange planet he stood on now, straight off into the ever-growing abyss, it still wouldn't put him far enough away to escape the old man's dead face, his drooping flesh, and still open eyes looking off into another type of infinite distance, waiting on Bradley. Has that been 20 minutes? I don't know. I have an old analog watch, so I didn't look as closely as I should have. But let's see. tell you what, I will, I think I got like maybe 5 minutes. So I'm gonna like read a little bit of a story, of another story. And this one's called The Parable of the Lung. And where this story like picks up, basically, I guess like what you need to know for what I'm gonna read to you is this guy, Topher, the protagonist, he has been tasked just south of Memphis a day or two like after the ice storm, and lives in Oklahoma now. She's getting her PhD, and because of the storm with Topher, that if something happens, he can get father to his lung transplant surgery. And so this is to pick up Lafayette. I should also say that Lafayette had shot himself in the, but Erin, the wife, does not, or his ex-wife, does not like want to believe that. Like she wants to save. Standing on his roof, and a pair of Clorox-stained boxers, a loosely knotted noose around his neck. Gumballs from the tree overcrowded the gutters and piled up the slanted roof and accumulated around his bare feet. The tree had largely survived. Lafayette's efforts to mount the roof had pulled loose the stitches in his ear, and skinny swirls of blood colored the white bandage like a peppermint. I stepped out of the truck and asked him what the shit it was he thought. I had been contemplating killing myself, he said. Well, yeah, I gathered a bit about us fishing. Nah, he said, and his breath pulsed like a chimney pipe in the chilly morning air. This was the dead of February when fish hunkered down at the lake bottoms, barely moving in their dormancy. But Erin had insisted on the fishing euphemism, something about perceived reality and helping her father to feel as comfortable as possible riding with someone other than her to his transplant surgery. Last night, I had gone over to check on Lafayette and crash on his couch after the hospital pager Erin had given me alerted us that the next incoming page would mean the lung had been harvested. Lafayette and I ate and I hung around for a long while after in the dark house, not really himself in a powerless house, only the specter of his murdered company. But it was awkward just sitting there, no sounds but Lafayette's wheezing and the jabs he took at me about babysitting him. Bath, he said. Will you warm me up some milk first? That sort of thing. We couldn't watch television. Hell, we couldn't even drink. Good. I wasn't getting a new lung tomorrow. Lafayette might have disagreed given what I had done to his daughter, but I wasn't that big of an asshole. I guess we could have read, but the only books Lafayette had lying around were a Bible and some old devotionals stacked on the tank of the toilet. I saw the upper rooms when I got up to go to the bathroom. Could have held us a little prayer group, asked the good Lord to bless our journey and for his healing grace during the operation tomorrow. It already felt too much like we were holding vigil. I finally said something about hitting the sack. I hadn't even led into it, just kind of blurted it out. I couldn't really see Lafayette's face, a voice that said, just what kind of a dumb son of a bitch do you think, you and Erin think I am? Do y'all think I'm the kid y'all didn't have or something? You waiting to come over here and tuck me in too? Go the fuck home, Topher, so I can get some rest. I felt shitty about it, and I felt even shittier now seeing the result. Nah, I guess not, Lafayette said, again from the roof. Suppose we can go fishing now. And I'll stop. Anyway, yeah.
In a small southern town myself, and I recognize at that point you do know these kind of people just by living so authentically as Seasonous Exodus, where you've got that last the loneliness and the almost presence of his wife that it just seems so authentic. It's almost like, you almost have to have experienced that to recognize how that truly works. So my question is, where do you develop that kind of of authenticity to come up with a scene like that. A related question, a second question is, I think I see the writers that have inspired you, but I'd love to hear the writers that you would say have inspired you.
Okay, all right, so I think the first question has to do with Seasonous Exodus, which that's one of only two stories that kind of like grew out of a specific writing prompt. Like a tetralogy, but in like flash fiction form. So it sort of tells the story of 4 seasons. And one of them is not in good health, has the story, it has like a funny beginning. Had gone to the beach with her son, and at night. But what Jordan, my wife's like grandmother, heard was herbicide, and she was like, "Why would I want to go eat herbicide?" I think like the beginning of dementia and stuff like that too. I switched those but it's the wife who has bone marrow cancer. All of that to say, I was thinking a lot about, I had family as well, a lot off of like what he was going through. But I think I don't know, so we were talking about motifs earlier, and I was also, like, one thing that I, like, noticed over the course of, like, a lot of these stories is all of them have, like, some sort of, a character's dealing with, like, a sort of foreseeable mortality. And I probably worry about that more than I should, but it comes out, like, in my writing. In terms of, like, how to make that a believable character, I don't know. It's like I'm just slinging stuff against the wall to see what sticks, but I'm trying to figure out like what that character wants, or what any character on the page like wants, and having that like understanding going into the story so that I know like what's driving that person, because that's what like everyone has like some sort of desire like in a particular scene, and that's I think like how I try to humanize characters, but I also a lot of my family members were old, and I grew up around a lot of like old people like growing up, and I was fascinated like with that, and had a lot of good material, I guess, like just from my own observations. And then like for the writer question, man, that is every time I get asked that question, and I need to make a list, but I can never, like, it's like I draw a blank and I can't think of a single writer's name in that moment. But I've talked about a few, like Larry Brown early on was an influence to get me to start writing. Brad Watson, I had a couple of classes with Barry Hannah, Jesmyn Ward, Louise Erdrich. I really like Bonnie Jo Campbell, writes like really like tough, gritty, like grit-lit stories. Jim Harrison, a lot. I mean, I guess I feel like I have to say Faulkner because I grew up like 30 minutes down the road from him. But Lewis Norden, Donald Harrington, like just as much. But there's so many, yeah, to try to, yeah, think of. But there's a few, yeah.
So speaking of other authors, I see a lot of similarities in the world that you have built in Bodock with the world that Barbara Kingsolver built in Demon Copperhead, with the grittiness, the poverty, the drug use. Do you think that that's uniquely Southern, or would that apply to any rural, poverty-stricken area of the country?
No, I think it's more rural than it is like Southern, probably. Like there are Southern ingredients probably versus like Midwestern ingredients that you would get. I mean, Bonnie Jo Campbell, like I mentioned, like she writes about this world as well, and she's I think like Michigan or Minnesota, somewhere in the upper Midwest. But no, I think it's definitely a it is not, yeah, that particular aspect is not specific, I don't think, to the South. I think you could probably find those nefarious doings in any rural area or any urban area. It would just look different. But yeah, to answer your question, I think it's more rural than it is specifically Southern. But yeah, there are ingredients, yeah, that make it Southern.
I've been so delighted with some of the writing that we've read. It was in the backyard that I grew up in. And it shouldn't necessarily affect your experience of reading, but the fact that I can identify places that I've been, I find it just gives me a tingle when I'm like, oh my gosh, I know that place. I have a feeling for it. I remember the ice storm very vividly. I've tried to explain to people who have not grown up in the South and experienced an ice storm how phenomenally beautiful, almost magical they are, that the world has been covered in glass, and how dangerous they are with all the down power lines. What did the ice storm, like why the ice storm? Like what did that mean to you? You were younger than I was. I was like college age when that happened. I have my own silly stories about it. But
Yeah, I was like 9, yeah.
Okay, so 9. What did it mean to you, and why have you chosen to make that the backdrop of so many stories?
Well, all right, yeah. Well, I think, so a number of things. One, the ice storm like lives on, as you demonstrated, like in the mythos of like the Mid-South. Like this was a devastating storm. There were like 5 or 6 inches of ice just like suddenly overnight, and there were places in the most rural areas of my county and other counties that went like 4 to 6 weeks without power. Like that's how long it took to clear out trees and then rethread power lines and stuff like that. So, and it was a formative memory. Like I remember and worked a lot of those details like into this collection, like obviously, but I didn't set out with the idea that I would write an entire collection of ice storm stories. I wrote one, started it, and it's the last story in the collection, Offerings. And that started just as like, I grew up Southern Baptist, so I was like, oh, I'll do an allegory of like some biblical story. And so I decided to write like a retelling of the flood. And so I was like, the flood becomes the ice storm, Noel becomes Noah, the family cabin like out in the middle of the woods becomes the ark. There were like pairs of animals that they had collected as well, but they didn't survive revisions, so they're not in the final draft of that story. But it just was intended to be a standalone story. And then when I got to grad school, I sort of, I guess like subconsciously, I wrote another ice storm story and then another one, and then thought like, it helps, I guess, like story collections to have some sort of unifying narrative thread. And I had that with the fictitious town, but I guess I, was like, oh, this will get published much faster if I have another narrative thread, like an ice storm. That didn't help. It took a really long time for this story, for this collection to come together and get published this past June. Those of you who are in here as writers, I don't intend for this to be discouraging. I hope that it's encouraging. But I started working on this collection when I started my MFA program, like in 2008. And so it was a really long time. But I finished it around like 2019. It just took a long time to get it published. But so to answer your question, like, yeah, it wasn't intended at the beginning, but I definitely started working to make all of these like ice storm stories. And I feel like the ice storm lent a lot of, like I could mine a lot of imagery from an ice storm and like different ways that I could describe like what that sounded like based on characters' perspectives and how they would perceive those sensory details, so.
I had a question that relates to the title and the town and the tree itself. I know that the tree is really, the Bodock tree is a character in your first story, Mistletoe. I feel it is. And you've named the town after it. So where did you get the significance? What drew you to that title or how you feel like that goes through the collection?
Okay, so I grew up in Pontotoc, Mississippi, and so Bodock is basically my fictional version of Pontotoc. And I'll try to make this like as quick as possible. There are Bodock trees like throughout the South, but in Pontotoc, at one time, the largest Bodock tree in the state of Mississippi, like we claimed that tree in Pontotoc. And so we have a Bodock festival that celebrates that tree every year. In 2001, we had another February weather phenomenon, but this time it was a tornado that came through, and it took out that tree. So that tree, like that particular Bodock tree no longer like stands in Pontotoc, but it was it's part of like Pontotoc's identity, but it also is like a family like mythos as well. My grandparents, my dad's parents like had a Bodock tree in their backyard. And so I remember these like heavy horse apples just like dislodging from the tree and just like pounding they also like raised a lot of like different animals and stuff. And so maybe that's where the animals and offerings like went with revision. But yes, Bodock there. And then I didn't really think about anything like thematic with Bodock, but it is a very decay resistant and resilient. You harvest it, cut it, once it dries, like you can't do really anything with it. It becomes as hard as concrete. And so there's a rich orange like wood that comes out of it as well, but it's also a very stubborn tree. Collection like representative of the Beechams and that whole family was that the things that make them strong, that make them resilient, are also the things that like keep them they're very stubborn and they're very resistant to what they think might be decay, but some people might think is progress or something like that. So I wasn't thinking about that when I was writing it. I was just like, Bodock sounds like a town in Mississippi, like it sort of sounds like Podunk or Boondock or something like that. So I was like, yeah, let's go with it. Well, Bodock, yeah. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Our next author is Olivia Clare Friedman. Friedman is the author of 4 books: the story collection Disasters in the First World, and 2 poetry collections, The 26-Hour Day and An Arm Fixed to a Wing, which was published this past spring by LSU Press. Friedman has received an O. Henry Prize, a Pushcart Prize, Writers Award, as well as a Ruth Lilly Fellowship from the Poetry Foundation. Her work has appeared in the Paris Review, the Atlantic, Granta, and the Southern Review, among others. She directs the Center for Writers at the University of Southern Mississippi. Her latest collection, An Arm Fixed to a Wing, seeks out the spiritual elements that haunt the everyday, the divine wing fastened to an earthly arm. Elegies and poems of nostalgia appear alongside pieces celebrating the speaker's present moment, with the underlying knowledge that such moments slip past too easily. Marianne Chan calls reading An Arm Fixed to a Wing like wading through a luscious dream. These poems seem to exist in that gauzy space between sleep and waking. Please welcome Olivia Clare Friedman to the stage.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for being here. I don't take it lightly when anyone attends a reading. I think it's a wonderful thing to do and to do for one another. I think it's a great act of generosity, and we really need those acts of generosity right now, and that kind of spirit. We're with, you're with your people who love books and who love literature and who are interested in what is human, right, and what makes us human. So thank you for being here. It means a lot. You can do a lot with your Friday afternoon, and you're here, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much to Kendall, to Chris, to Mary, and to everyone who makes this symposium happen. I was very happy to be here a few years ago with my novel, and I was thrilled to be asked back. So I write fiction and poetry, and I actually consider fiction to be my main genre. So my very first book was a book of poems, and then I wrote a book of short stories, and then a novel, which I came here with. So if I follow the pattern, then it's stories and a novel next, right? I mostly work on fiction. So I was really happy when this book of poems kind of came to be. I'm going to read about 8 to 10 poems. We'll see how many, and you can keep track in your head as we're going, what number we're on. This is before. You remember this, don't you? We said later we'd remember, and now it's later, do you? You wrote your brother, then alive, a long email, back when you wrote and read for hours. We both did. And we slept till 11, back when we slept so late. And if I don't write this down, it will all fall away. But even I can't remember which city that was, which bus we'd taken, what we'd drunk the night before. We'd been trying to save money. We didn't eat, but we drank, and that 1 a.m. bartender gave us free rounds while we sang not sure what. Knowing you, it was Italian, and we drank not sure what, because why? It was free, our cups full, and then not, and all we could do was walk back how we'd come, stumbling toward our anonymous room. There are some lines in that poem that I think, that's the second poem in my most recent book, that really speak to some things that I'm thinking throughout the book, which is this idea of kind of slowing down time. And I tend to think of a poem as really having the ability to do that, to slow down time and to take a moment and to slow it down. So that idea of, you remember this, don't you? We said we would, but then we kind of went on with life, right? And we didn't. And so something that I try to do when I'm writing, and especially when I'm writing poetry, like that have meant something to me, and to try to slow them down and really kind of think through them. And that's a big part of what I was doing, I think, with this book, and I still do it. I'm sort of obsessed with doing that in writing. I think that's something that my writing practice, that I ask of it. The second poem is called Finding Him, and my ex-husband went from being, he did a very interesting career change. He went from being a scholar of Shakespeare to a paramedic. And so when Ashley was talking about her father being a paramedic last night and then turning to gardening, that made a lot of sense to me. It's a highly stressful job. And in his case, you kind of become nocturnal. He went on night shifts, and just everything changes. And so this poem was inspired by something that he told me, where they're keeping this little boy alive, and all of these different healthcare workers, one by one, were going into where this little boy was for hours doing chest compressions, keeping him alive, and they were able to do it for hours to just keep it continuously going, and he did eventually revive. When you're doing chest compressions, you want to do them to the rhythm of Stayin' Alive by the Bee Gees. So you always leave a poetry reading with a little information. That's good. So there's a reference to that. Finding him. When the heart gives out, you must use your whole body to bring it back. That's what he tells me. He's begun doing this for a living. It takes two people switching off, counting chest compressions to the beat of the Bee Gees, if it helps. Bringing back a heartbeat takes the whole self, two selves, sometimes many. There was the story of the little boy who fell in the forest. They found him that way among the crisscrossing oaks, all the living things scurrying around him. He'd been there for some time, having walked out the front door entirely on his own. They did compressions for a long time. Medics breathed into his airway. We have deep wells within us, I'm convinced. During this, it's believed, the child's heart restarted 3 times. He came back to life again, again, again. I will end the story there. So I started in poetry before I was. Then I wrote and came out with my first book of poems. And then I wrote prose for a long time, and I'm still writing it. And but kind of didn't write poems for a while. Just sort of took a pause with poems. I couldn't get it to work, and I was revising it a lot. And it takes a lot for me to leave something behind. But it takes a lot for me to do it. I usually try, I don't want to overwork anything, but I usually try to really get it to where I do that with this story. And I thought, well, what if I make it a poem? And sometimes that's just how I revise. I'll take prose, I'll revise it that way, and then I put it back into prose. And I always do that with my fiction students, whether or not they write poems too. And they revise that way. So that's something that I do pretty often. It can be time-consuming, but it's really worth it. And also because my brain, it just sees things differently when it's looking at the line. So when I put the sentence into the line, I start to see the work differently. And that's what happened with this. And then I kept it as a poem. So because it was originally a short story, it reads a little bit more like a persona poem. Christmas Eve. On the bus ride home, stars looked liquid, trees bowed down, memories gummed my brain, the time I'd been too reasonable about love, the unreasonable time too, the time I saw maggots eating a frog, all of it ran together. I was rum drunk and cold. I hugged myself for warmth. My grandmother had raised me in the home she still lived in. I barely saw her. On the bus, a few were asleep or deep in their phones. 3 seats ahead, to my left, a woman was swathed in a puffer coat. A fleecy hood encircled her head. She was my age, maybe a little younger, in and out of sleep. Her eyes would close, and when the bus rocked, her eyes would open. Her lashes were so long, I thought if I sat closer, I might hear the pulse of each blink. She had a face that looked like she could understand. I wanted to sit beside her. I wanted to tell her a few things for which I hoped to be forgiven. So like I said, I kept that as a poem, but what was interesting about it was that when I turned it into a poem, I suddenly understood what I was trying to write in the story, because I think what I was trying to write in the story were in those last lines. I wanted to sit next to her. I had some things that I wanted to confess to her that I thought maybe she could forgive me for, but I didn't discover that until I distilled the story draft into a poem. I could always go back still now and make that into a story, but I liked that happened from me distilling it into that poem form. That was really interesting to me. I also like that something else that I told myself to do was to be very vulnerable in terms of what the I wants. That's something that if you've read John Cheever's story Reunion, where the narrator is reuniting with his father after a while, and there's this great paragraph and he says, I wanted this from my father. I wanted us to have a photograph taken of us. And it's this really vulnerable moment. And I wanted to do something like that and be very stark on the page. I'm going to read a poem that's very different from all the others, and it's from my first book, which is called The 26-Hour Day. So we're on poem 4 now, if we're keeping track. And so this book came out 10 years ago, which doesn't feel like 10 years ago to me, but it was. And it was one of the first poems that I wrote and when I was really serious about writing. And I like it too because it's just about sound. It makes sense through sound. So don't worry about making sense of the language and the conventional way that we think of sense and making meaning. Just let the sounds happen. It's an imitation of Walt Whitman's To a Locomotive in Winter, which is a praise poem for the locomotive. And that's a nice thing to do, to use that kind of scaffolding, that structure sometimes, to use that as a model, right? And in this case, it's a poem of praise. But again, it doesn't make sense in the way that we think of sense. Thee for my red breast, thee in thy overture, thy muscle dual thrush, and thy blatantly clock, thy bleeding St. Cyprian body, thy palpitating Siegfried, parallax, habeas corpus, slang at thy sides, thy metropolis, now swine and robin pantheon, now tar in the resistance, thy loom blockade bound variable star, tilled with perpendicular, thy dualist and turpentine, Belgravia from thy smut, thy knitted franchise, spurge and vandal, trench mouth of thy whippoorwill, thy caraway, Oberon, and Mobius fluorescing, through storm now spackle, now shank of soldier catalepsing, trick of the modulation emblem of motley, come sewage the muse, and merge with stratosphere and fall to cue Susa, by PM thy silica signals Lancelot to swing, Roman through my chaos, with all thy anarchy of musk ox, thy smarmy lamps at nihil, thy prehistoric laughter, thy ecliptic rumbling like an Easter, lax on thyself, replete, thine own trackfish hog haranguing, no sequestered Debussy of talcum harness or global platitude thine, thy trinity of screech, laurel o'er the preempt wide, albeit the lamb, to the free slander unpent and glider and sphinx. Not an easy poem to read. But yeah, I do that with my students too. We do, we do a lot with exercises, writing various poems, and then we have a week where I say, let's just play with sound. Let's see what happens with sound. What words do you love? What words do you love because of the texture of the sound? Some of us have been up here talking about when we were kids and kind of what appealed to us then about fiction, poetry, both, and a lot of it for many of us is just words, right? Words that we loved, the texture of words we loved. I keep a really, really long list of words that I love. And sometimes I'll just say to myself, no, you put one of those in a paragraph. Just try, see what happens. Because it brings me back to that time when I just would, go around saying the word water all the time. It was a really cool word. So if whether or not you're a prose, that love, and I feel like this book of poems for me, I had sort of I'm going to say something really corny. I had some sort of a renewal of vows with my writing life, and which needs to happen, right? To have stamina in this, you kind of you can kind of float away and then come back. And I write pretty regularly, but I had taken a little bit of a pause, and I think that this book kind of renew those vows with writing, and also, and again, I warned you that that was corny, but it's true. It did happen for me, and I think rediscovering life helped me with that in a big way. I'm going to, so now we're on poem. 5 more poems. I'm going to read, I wrote a longer sequence of poems that's in the middle of this book, and they're called the camera poems. And you'll see quite a bit of influence from my fiction writing in here. There's dialogue in here. I started putting dialogue in the poems, which I really like working with in poems now. I also have an acting background, and so I wanted to bring some of that in. It's always kind of tricky to me to figure out, and I know through this when we've had something big in our life happen, especially during formative years, how do you put that into your writing? So it's taken me years to kind of figure out what I want to do with that, and that's still happening. But I did write these camera poems, and one of the things that the main character of the poems is really interested in is thinking about like what makes a genuine moment, because she's an actress and she does a lot of performing, and she doesn't really want to do that anymore. And I think about that too with poems, because I think about trying to write a poem as a genuine moment. This is called Lancashire, which is a really big street in LA. She's being watched from all sides. No, this is how it feels that she's being watched. Is anyone even looking at her? She's on the bus, back from the shoot, makeup still on, her hair greased back, lipstick hardened, and the palm trees moving silent like a film unspooling, rare LA window. No, nobody. That man over there is asleep, his arms crossed, his head drooping down, and this woman's on her phone, and that man's on his phone, and that woman is too, and that one, and that one, and that one, and that man to her right is praying the rosary. She sees the beads in his hand, the cross trapped in the man's fist, and if he ever looks back, looks to her, she'll look at him too, as if with a shared thought, and that will be something true. Almost something to touch, she thinks, there. But maybe his eyes are closed. She can't see his eyes. That's the trouble. And then the bus skids, and the bus dips back. I didn't worry too much when I was writing these poems about making a narrative thread. It did just sort of organically happen, but I didn't go into the sequence kind of plotting things out in any way. And I had, I could play around with things more because they are poems, and so there were certain connective, there were parts of the connective tissue that I felt like I didn't have to put in there. And I also often feel like that with fiction too. I don't want to include too much connective tissue. If I feel like it's becoming kind of a pain to write, then the reader's going to feel like it's a pain to read. So I think that's something big that poetry has taught me for my fiction, is when I don't need all the connective tissue that perhaps I might think I do. This is called The Well, and you can see there's a lot of dialogue here with the director, and I capitalized the director, and there's this power dynamic that's happening between the two of them. And this is based on things that happened to me, and so I was taking some of that dialogue and putting it in here. The Well. She is giving things she doesn't have. That's what the director tells her. If you don't have the real thing, don't do it. Don't piss in the pot. It has to be in you already. Say the line again, he tells her. She looks down for a beat, collects something within herself, looks to him with heat pumping through her, she hopes. Don't talk to me like that, she says. Don't you ever talk to me like that. She waits, he waits. Okay, good, he says. Now again, and this time, gather it. Let it course through you. Do you know what I mean? She tells him she knows what he means. She looks down for a moment, collects something in herself, looks back up. Don't talk to me like that, she says. Don't you ever talk to me like that. Good, he says. Now louder. Don't you ever talk to me like that. Good. Now this time, okay, contain it. It's coursing, but you're holding it. Hold. When you speak, let it go. Got it? When you say the line, release it. She looks down, she collects, she waits, he waits. She makes him wait a little longer. Say it again, he says, again. And she makes him wait, makes him more, and then longer, a little longer. I'm going to read just a couple more poems from here, from this sequence. Well, really just one more. And it's called Blind Mink. I had this friend who she would recite poems, monologues, all kinds of things to herself, and she would go in a dark closet and just kind of seal it off and not let any light into the room, and she would just speak it to herself. And it was a way that she got to be in this kind of private moment, which was really important for her and really speaks to a lot of what I'm thinking about and have thought about as I write these poems that have gone into this book, of that private moment and how maybe you can reach a genuine moment through that kind of privacy. I talk about that with my students a good bit too, that, you know, it's great that it's wonderful that my poems are in here, but they have to start for me privately, and they have to start in a book that I'm handwriting in that only I see, and I know that only I see it. And then if I decide, then maybe I type it up, and then maybe someone else sees it. And when I was a student, maybe I would bring it into workshop, or I show it to a friend, and then maybe I try to get it published, and then maybe it goes into something like this. But those are all big maybes, and it has to start with a private moment, because for me, if it doesn't start with a private moment, then it's not as genuine as I want it to be, and I have to let myself have that feeling of privacy with it. And so I was thinking about that a lot with my friend who would do this in the closet and recite things to herself in the closet, because only she heard that, right? Only she had that experience. And if you've never done something like that, or just been in your room by yourself and read things aloud to yourself, do it. It's an amazing experience, and it's just for you. I love what Ashley said last night about, what we're doing it's about us, it's about the self, but then it makes a pathway for others to come in. And before that pathway can happen, we have to do this part. And I loved the way that you phrased that. So this is called Blind Mink. And I'll stop after this one. She is waving her hand in the air. She is talking, saying the same lines again and again in her dark closet with the door closed. The closet like a deep hole inside the inside, because this is where she begins to understand the language of what she is saying, each syllable. This is what a teacher once told her. Think only of what you're saying. Act on the lines, not between. She is forcing herself, to think only the words, their meaning, even though this is the 100th time repeating. She ends, she stops. Make your mind blank. Blank mind, blank mind. She has her own mantra to help her end, to find a vastness, an inner clearing. Blank mind. Blind mink, ink lid, kid link, mid blink. Now she'll sit a long time, silent. She won't even open the door. This is how the words empty. Her mind goes bare, and then she imagines a great storm. Leaves gather, plume. The trees knock against themselves, falling over, disappearing. All the roots in the earth, the ground moving, the roads rolling like carpets, vanishing, and the sky too, vanishing. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for that. This is really low. I'll just pick it up. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about sound and like the sense of sound, because I feel like there's a way in which something in that sound speaks or like moves towards sense and meaning in this way that like we can't immediately articulate, but I feel like leads us in new directions that we wouldn't like rationally think to go. And I feel like I hear that working in your poems. Can you talk about how you get there and when you know that the sound has sort of led you somewhere good?
Yeah, and I love knowing too, they've done studies where they've seen that when we hear something that has a lot of alliteration or just a lot of sonic movement to it, they know there's more brain activity happening. And if you think about, when you were small and you had nursery rhymes or you had, and you had that sonic play, it helped you remember. There's also something incredibly foundational to it that we all kind of go to. And so, yeah, I think that and then you can hear that in the sound of it in the words, but then there are also weird things in there like "Come Sewage the Muse," even when you have a poem that's kind of praise. But it does. And it also, I think especially if for me, writing a while and writing in different genres, out for me. And it helps me with my dialogue a lot in fiction. And I mean, I've heard that with all the fiction writers who have read, that you can, like, I hear poems in that dialogue too, and the sound of it and the music of it. And Welty, of course, was the best there is, with her dialogue and the music, the sound of the dialogue.
Hi, Olivia.
Hi.
Thank you for such a beautiful reading. I don't think this is corny at all, what you said about your vow renewal for writing. And if you feel comfortable, would you mind sharing one of the vows that you wrote to yourself? You totally don't have to.
Yeah, the vows. Yeah, I mean, I think that we've all seen people with great talent. In addition to talent, stamina needs to be there. And we have probably all seen people with great talent who stop, who stop or whatever it is. And I think so much of this is, I think talent needs to be there first, but I also think I tell my graduate students that one of the best things that I can do for you is to tell you things that I doubt the structure of someone, or with, it's sometimes, it's not like we all have editors who are, on us all. So just without having that structure, and that's one of the best things that I can do for you is talk to you about what that writing practice looks like when it's just you. And so that was I really took that as a challenge. A loved one, or you work, many of my, that it's gonna stop. Now, if you wanna take a pause, take a pause. Intentional pauses are great. I just took one, I needed it, helped me through it and helped me through the pause. So it will come back. And I believe in those intentional silences and pause. Do you know what I mean?
start, like with your poems or whatever, being personal and on your own time. But do you have any other advice for kind of creating a collection of poems or just a collection of writing in general?
So I have a book of stories too, and I would say for both of my books of poems and my book of stories, they came together really organically. I wasn't thinking, well, here are just my 50 best poems that I wrote, and I'm going to put them together. And in fact, when this book just came up, I got an email that that I'd always wanted to get, which was, I saw a poem of yours online. Do you have a book? We'd love to publish it. And that was for this book that just came out, and I didn't. When that could have happened, and I didn't let myself just take 50, and fortunately they were still there with that opportunity. But together, ones that surprise you, the collections that surprise, suddenly you have a book. For me, as opposed to saying, I'm going to set out and I'm going to do this. Now, of course, and using that to bring everything together, but it does have to start, I think, from these genuine moments of things that you are truly...
Okay, this feels like a basic question, but I generally title of your collection to it, so I'm just curious how you came up with it.
Yeah, it's actually a line from one of the poems, so I title my poems or my stories too, is I'll take a line out of there, and I'm very my prose, and so I took a line from one of the poems because I thought it spoke to, and so I'm interested in looking at objects or looking at images that are more. Title was speaking to that. What's interesting is, speaking of stamina in the writing line, fixations, certain images, things that I can't stop writing about, that I've been writing. If you write, you probably do too, and they will keep going 10, 20, 30 years. And I think what separates us from the robots too. But that kind of souls, if I can say that.
So you said, thank you, first of all. You edit, how did you say it? You put your fiction into lines and then put it back into not lines. How? What does this mean?
Yeah, so I'll do it with a paragraph or a whole page, and I'll take it from the prose and I'll just start lineating it, and I revise it that way. So it's not like I just break the sentences up and that's it, but I'll add things. But I'm not only taking things out, I'll expand, and it just, for me, when I'm seeing, because I do tend to think in the line maybe more than I do in the as in terms of the sentence, and so when I'm putting sentences into lines, it distills it for me in a way that I can suddenly start to see all kinds of things, not just edits that I want to make at the sentence level, but themes and things that like really become central to what that prose was, and then I put it back into prose. And like I said, I do this with my students a lot, and it really is effective for them. So even though I know that I tend to think in terms of the line, even when I'm writing the sentence, and I think my theory is that many fiction writers do too, whether or not they write poems, that many of us do think of the sentence like many poets think of the line. But I've seen it be effective for students who don't write any poetry at all. So it's doing something. But the idea of revision is getting a new vision on it, right? So it's doing that too. It's just me getting a new kind of pair of eyes on what I'm writing, and it's really, really been worth it to me to do. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.
feel like we got a reading and a craft talk. I love that. We're going to take a brief-ish, so I'll see you back here in just a few minutes. We're going to get started back up in just a second, so if everyone will make their way back into the room for our next author. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if everyone will please take their seats, we're going to hear from our next author, Carrie R. Moore. Carrie R. Moore's fiction and essays have appeared in One Story, the Sewanee Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, the Southern Review, and others. She's received scholarships and fellowships from the Community of Writers, the Sewanee Writers Conference, and the Martha Heasley Cox Center for Steinbeck Studies. She earned her MFA in fiction at the Michener Center for Writers, where she won the Keene Prize for Literature and served as fiction editor of Bat City Review. Moore's debut collection of stories, Make Your Way Home, was published this July by Tin House. It is composed of 11 stories that span Florida marshes, North Carolina mountains, and southern cities, featuring characters who struggle to find love and belonging in the wake of painful histories. Lauren Groff describes Moore's stories as gorgeous, resonant, and startling. Deisha Filial says that they pulse with the kind of intimacy, beauty, and intensity that the best art conjures. Please welcome Carrie R. Moore.
All right, thank you. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah? All right. Thank you all for being here. And I also want to thank Chris, Kendall, Kim, President Miller, and everyone who was involved in organizing this symposium and making it go so smoothly. I have wanted to be a writer since I was a very young child. And so I feel blessed now at this stage of my life to be able to dedicate, a significant portion of my time to writing and literature, but I'm more so many other writers who give so much to their work and who understand what we're trying to do on the page in our own different ways and approaches. And by writer, I want to be clear that I do mean anybody here who identifies with that term, whether you're just starting or you're an MFA student, or you've published a book, or you feel like you have this writing life figured out, or you feel like maybe you don't. Truly, my favorite part of being a writer is talking to other writers, so I'm really excited to be here. My book, Make Your Way Home, is a story collection and a love letter to the Black South. I think of my book as having two central threads. The first, an attention to home in the physical sense as setting. I was born and raised in the Atlanta area, but when writing about the southern region, I wanted to capture how much variety there is in terms of landscape. So a Georgia Sea Island versus the Florida Everglades versus the Texas portion of the Gulf of Mexico. Or Birmingham as a city versus Austin as a city, or a small town in Appalachian, North Carolina versus a suburb in Kentucky. All of these settings have their own particularities and histories. The second larger thread of my book is an attention to home and people, especially by way of relationships that have been changed and in some cases strengthened after difficult shared experiences and new intimacies. So siblings who have survived violence together, or marital infidelity, or grown adults who are making sense of their childhood experiences. Because home, of course, can be a spiritual space created in community. In both threads, the physical thread and this emotional thread, I'm asking how the past affects the present. What I love about getting to talk about and read from this book here is that for the first time, I feel like I can be candid about writing because there are so many writers here. I think we all have parts of this process that we find personally difficult, whether it's revising or endings or trusting your work. And for me, I find looking at published pieces really, really hard and difficult. This is a book that I spent 10 years writing during the first part of my adulthood in particular. And though it's normal to spend that amount of time on a project, we've heard Robert and Addie talk about that during our time together, it does mean that you grow as a writer in person alongside your work, so these stories in my case. And there's uncertainty that comes with that. What if the writer I am now would have made different or better choices? Or conversely, how much should you revise the work of your younger self? Is it like tampering the evidence? Not of a crime, but of who you were at the time and the way you saw the world. All this to say, like the characters in my stories, I also struggle with past and present. To help combat this feeling, I began this personal challenge when my book came out in July. Whenever I read publicly, especially outside of Texas where I live, I've asked myself to read something that has a specific connection to that place where I'm reading. And hopefully, eventually, this will encourage me to read aloud from all 11 stories in the collection and not hide from the work of my youngest self. It'd be obvious to read the story set in Mississippi, but I thought I would do something different. I often read interviews from other writers to keep me going when things get tough, and I have this deeply annotated copy of Paris Review interviews that I return to every now and then. And so here's what years ago I annotated from Eudora Welty's interview. The interviewer asked her, do you make changes in galleys? And galleys are those early versions of books that are used for promotional purposes. They still have errors, but they're close enough to the finished product that you can send them out and get people an idea of what it is. And this was Welty's response to if she makes changes at that point. I correct or change words, but I can't rewrite a scene or make a major change because there's a sense then of someone looking over my shoulder. It's necessary anyway to trust that moment when you were sure at last you had done all you could, done your best for that time. When it's finally in print, you're delivered. You don't ever have to look at it again, unless, of course, you're given a reading. It's too late to worry about its failings. I'll have to apply any lessons this book has taught me toward writing the next one. So in that spirit, I've chosen to read the very first story I wrote for Make Your Way Home, a story that is 11 years old now, and as far as I can get from my current lived moment. So I'm living with the discomfort, and also trying to honor the truth that sometimes we write stories at one time in our lives that we couldn't have written at another time. So I'm gonna read a story called Cottonmouths, which is set in the late 1920s in Florida, near Naples, Florida. Okay. Cottonmouths. The summer Mama and I share pregnancies, the cottonmouths come crawling out of the marshes. It's a wonder to watch the way those snakes float their own weight, curving over the brown water and nosing into the mud. They slip all the way through the sawgrass, work themselves into lazy balls on our land. I ain't going no place, you imagine them saying, now that I'm all comfortable here. And you kind of get what they mean. Sometimes I watch them from the back porch, especially when it's too hot to move, much less go carrying a baby inside you, thrashing in your belly like it's trying to shrug off your body heat. Every spring and summer, we get them, same as the other folks in Collier County, though they like our house best because of the way water collects in a little dip not far from our porch. Not so much water that we get eaten alive by mosquitoes, but enough for a Florida cottonmouth to stay cool. 2 years ago, one of Daddy's friends was helping to clear them out, and he got bit right on the calf. I remember him sitting in Mama's kitchen, his boots sideways on the floor and dripping clumps of mud on the wood, his right hand clutching a glass of whiskey. Daddy had lanced the wound and wrapped it, the red blurring over the white. Mama couldn't take her eyes off that spot, kept murmuring, "Thank you, Mr. Dursey," getting out there like that. And he grinned to her through slitted eyes, grateful. He didn't die. And the next time the men came back from laying the Tamiami Trail, that highway they worked before switching to railroads, he and my father were out there again, glancing toward the house to see if Mama was watching. Mama doesn't really like when I sit out alone. You got 2 people to think about now, she said before, and you can't go focusing on yourself. She worries a lot about cottonmouths and heat waves and sickness, about money and the work she's missing in the orchard now that she's too big to pick grapefruits at Deep Lake. Sometimes she pulls me off the porch to help her around the house. She presses lavender into the rag cloths we carry around, holding the rough fabric over our nostrils as we search the hen pen for eggs or shake sea grapes off the trees or manage the harvest in Daddy's absence, things I'm expected to do every day now. After we boat into town for tea from the supply store, she brews it with ginger on our pot-bellied stove, and we rest the cups on our thighs, pointing as we watch the cottonmouths carve symbols in the dirt with their bodies, which look like Ms. Davis's cursive on the classroom chalkboard. It doesn't help, really, all this holding up and mixing in. We're always sick somehow, whether we take lavender or not, trading off days when our feet ache or our breasts throb. I look at Mama high on the porch steps. She rests her hand on her balloon of a belly and watches the trees like Daddy's gonna come back any minute. Every now and then, she gets a little smile on her face, and I think of me tumbling around in her womb way back when, somersaulting at the idea of her. I pat my belly, praying for my own baby to flip around. Even with the nausea, we're at peace in such moments, so Mama thinks she sees something moving in the grass. "Don't you go messing with those," she says, if we see a stripe draped over a log. "When your daddy's back, he'll take care of them." She is always saying things like this. Never mind that Daddy can be gone for weeks at a time, or that her calloused feet, now swollen past their usual size, could squash any cottonmouth if she weren't so afraid. Her body is as muscled as my father's, all that farming and grapefruit picking. Yet he has a way of making it soft, soft enough for her to groan when he takes her feet into his hands and teases the soreness from them. "I'm glad it was you," she tells him when she thinks I'm out of earshot. He kisses her belly. Really, she only wants me to hear the important things. You might try putting your feet up to get that swelling down, or squeezing a little grapefruit in your bathwater. Or, no, cross the stitches this way for a hat so it stays on your baby's head as best it can. Or even when I stand behind her, braiding her thick, dark hair into twists as fat as the cottonmouths, if it's a girl, you want to tease the scalp like this so the hair will grow. Wouldn't I do the same if it was a boy? She tilts her head back, her smooth skin darkened. "I think," she says, "you've been spending too much time teasing boys as it is." What she doesn't explain to me is where the babies will sleep. In July, when he slips away from the Atlantic coastline, my father returns and brings us back watermelons. He's quiet, watching me eat, his cheeks pitted and sun-beaten. Then he gets the crib from the shed and wipes down the dust and owl droppings. He doesn't look at me when he sets it up in the bedroom, close to my parents' bed. A few years ago, I was small enough to sleep there too, but now I've got my own bed in the front room. "Such a cute little thing," I say, running my hands over the crib's wood. There's a mattress inside, a small pillow with some orange stitches. I picture both of our babies sleeping there, my sister and my daughter, tiny fists touching. My mother sighs behind me. She's on the bed, her knees slightly parted. Cute, all right, till it starts waking you up. "Maybe they won't cry," I say, peering down into the crib, reaching in a hand like there is already something to soothe. They'll look over at each other and just grin. When I turn around, Daddy's in the doorway studying Mama. He rubs the back of his neck and looks more tired than anything. "Oh, Twyla," my mother says, "both of them can't fit in that little thing." When Daddy leaves again, it's like he takes some of Mama up the road with him. Sometimes I can feel her growing tired of me, like when she suddenly dumps the lemons on the table and storms out of the kitchen, or when I see her squinting at me under the clothesline, whipping the sheets into neat squares before dropping them into the basket. "Who is it, Twy?" she whispers with that look on her face, and my mouth goes kind of dry, and I shrug and say, "Can I have some water?" She brings it to me and sits me down and brushes her fingers over my hair. I ask her how things are changing, what things were like when this was Colusa territory, then Seminole, then eventually Lee County, then split off into Collier, and she lets me go. One day in early August, when I'm on the back porch and trying to count how many cottonmouths there must be, figuring the ones Daddy's gotten rid of, she comes up behind me and mimics my posture on the railing. It can't be easy with her belly hanging so low in her blue dress. "Twy," she says real slow. "Twy, did someone make you? Can't you tell me that much, baby?" And when I look at her from this angle, at the skin lined under her eyes, it feels like I've got a wad of love grass wedged in my throat. My tongue prods the roof of my mouth, and I think about how wet boys' tongues are, wet and surprisingly warm when you thought your own mouth was warm enough. "Twy," she says again, her fingers on my wrist. I shake my head. "No." No. She brings her face closer to mine. Then tell me who it was. She is so close to me that our foreheads nearly touch, and I wonder if she can see all of it. These boys I can't really explain, except to say that maybe everything began that moment 7 months ago when I came in for a glass of water and saw her with Daddy in the kitchen. He was sitting at our old table, trying to sew up some buttons on his dress shirt. She came up behind him and ran one finger down the line of his neck, and I saw the way he turned to her. "Look straight," she said, and he obeyed, the needle still in his hand. She slid her fingers over his hair, passing his shoulders, gliding along his back. Then she did it again, trailing her mouth after her touch. He groaned. I stared at the part in her scalp as she leaned over him, and then I crept back to my room, ignoring my thirst because I knew this was a part of her I wasn't supposed to see. But when Mama's so close to me now, eyes questioning, it's hard to keep these sorts of things away from her. Part of me wants her to see, especially since I can't fix my mouth to explain. The game that stopped being a game, that first Tuesday. One of the boys in Miss Davis's class, Pearlie, the Thompsons' youngest, was walking home in front of me. I followed him for a while and watched his neck peeking out his collar, and I put my finger there. He kind of froze, then looked back at me, and when he twitched his mouth, the little hairs there twitched too. I could tell the way he looked at me wasn't the way it had been with Mama and Daddy in the kitchen, but he still took my hand and walked me the rest of the way back to the house. That's how we were for a few weeks, the tip of my finger just above his collar, and his hand grabbing it quick, until one day I put my lips on his neck too. He gasped a little and reached around for my waist. Then he walked us off the road into the old Williams farm, and we went inside the barn. Then things hurt, then stopped hurting, and at the end, when his face tightened, things seemed like they hurt for him. "It's because I helped you with your reading that time, isn't it?" he asked when he pulled back. Though I didn't know what he was talking about. When we did our reading together, it hadn't felt like either of us was helping the other. He must have seen that I didn't remember the way he did, because then his face didn't show me anything at all. After that, on school days, he didn't walk slow enough for me to catch him. So I tried putting my finger on Wesley's neck, and when his face, yellow and smooth all over, broke into laughter, he said, "I guess nobody's telling lies," and led me to the barn right away. After, he lay beside me for so long that I wondered if this was what Mama enjoyed, the feeling that she could lead a man to some smaller place within himself. Wesley was bonier than Pearlie, his ribs small, thin claws around his quivering lungs. Though I later understand what Wesley had meant by people telling lies, because soon all the girls kind of sniffed when I walked by, and some of the boys started saying they'd taken me to that barn, though most of them had not. It makes the back of my knees ache to think Mama can see all this in me. My dress grows sticky and damp, clinging like willow. "I don't know," I say, "I don't know." She looks at me real hard. "What do you mean you don't know?" "I mean," I say, "I don't know which." She watches me a minute, then she understands. One night, Mama takes me outside and we sit on the porch, the moonlight revealing the roof on the next farm. She's got a thing for Bessie Smith, who's wearing out our radio with Lost Your Head blues. Even in the half-light, it's easy to see how Mama and I have swelled up something fierce, our twin stomachs the way we most resemble each other now. I cross my legs and pick at the scars I got from playing tag last winter. My mother fusses with the navel that sticks up under her dress. "I'm not one of your friends, Twyla," she tells me, though she says it like she really means she's my best friend. And so I can tell you what nobody else wants to. She runs a hand over my belly. Inside me, the baby leaps to her touch, and at this, her hand slows. You can be clever once the baby's born, once you see who it looks like. Better to wait until then anyway, since people will be kinder to a girl with a newborn. "What you mean be kinder?" I ask, but there's already a heat on my face. "I'm saying that you'll probably have a choice about who to come to. Main thing is, you don't want a boy with smooth hands and arms no bigger than twigs. You want someone willing to work hard and who'll do what he can to keep a roof over your heads. That's how you decide who to name." "For what?" She looks at me like I am one of the earthworms always inching around the porch railing, slow and ridiculous. "Don't be stupid, Twyla," she says. "You've got to have more help than me." My mouth has never been so dry. I imagine Pearlie or Wesley dressed in my father's overalls coming back to a house like Mama's, but that feels wrong, because of course it won't be the same house. I'll have to stand alone at the sink or with some woman who won't touch me when she talks or let me braid her hair. I'll have to pull clothes off a laundry line absent of Mama's dresses. I'll have to take care of this baby on some porch far from where Mama rocks hers, and though they might still grow to be close, it will not be the same because she will have held one of them more than the other. From the dirt road, laughter rises. I can see the boys coming back from fishing, slapping their poles at one another and lunging. They act so different when they're together. In the barn, you could tell what worried them. Both Pearlie and Wesley had started talking about what their daddies would bring them when they came back, and if they'd grow up to build railroads too. Or if they could pick grapefruits or work at the cannery or wait for the next job. Everybody around here knows by now how railroads bite, a screw in the hand, a blast gone the wrong way, the poison of heat stroke, or catching some sickness from draining swamp water. All that noise wears me out, Mama says, waving in the boy's direction. But before I can agree, she says, I guess you have to have it while you can. The fun, I'm saying. She grips the armrest and pushes herself up. Though she's breathing heavy, I don't help her. Don't even look in her direction, and she rocks herself forward and moves into the house. I let the night grow cool before I go back inside, but when I do, I have to wonder why Mama's standing on the chair. Twyla, she whispers, harsh, and she's got her skirt gathered in her fists, raised above her knees. Her legs have hardly a scar. Then I see her, the cotton mouth wide as my arm. She's coiled right by the edge of the table, perfectly still. Her speckled body so long and fat that I know I can't wrap my hand around her. If she's the kind of snake to work her way around the neck, she'd have to loop several times. Something in my throat squeezes and I have to slow my breathing. Twyla, Mama whispers, Twyla, go back outside and get some help, get somebody. I watch the cottonmouth, keep even my lips still in case it thinks I want to make trouble. Mama says my name louder, and is it the sound of her voice making my skin tighten? I shrink back from Mama from the cottonmouth until I barely fit around my baby. The cottonmouth stays still, but Mama is waving. Twyla, listen to me, she says. Go on outside and get one of them to do something about it. I don't move. I try to picture myself going up to Pearlie and Wesley and the other boys. They'll stop play fighting and look at my stomach. Then I'll have to ask for help, and I don't even know really if they would do it. I can get it, I say, though my voice shakes. Just let me get it. Twyla, listen to me. I am listening, I say. I'm looking at the cottonmouth, the black slits for eyes, the curve of her mouth. She lowers her head, and I think, oh, she's tired. She's much more worn out than you'd guess at first glance. I'm listening, and I'm talking too. Mama talks over me as I go to the walls and pull down the quilts that have hung there long as I can remember. When I come back, the snake still waits, and Mama whispers, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. I roll each quilt into a rope and make 2 lines, 2 blue and red and purple rows, stretching a path from the door to the kitchen table. I keep my eye on the cottonmouth, and it's watching me. I'm blinking. Come on, I say, and Mama says, what you talking to it for? The cottonmouth doesn't move at first, then unfurls a little. It's gonna bite you, Mama says. It's gonna bite you, and then where would you be? I see the broom in the corner, useless. Then I remember standing water, things being the right heat or too much. I crack the front door and light all the lamps and lower all the wood we have into the pot-bellied stove, orange brightening inside. I shut every window. It takes a while. Mama has to ease herself onto the kitchen table, down on all fours, and sweat collects on the back of my neck and in every fold of my body. We could pass out inside this place. All this time feels like being halfway between safety and something I don't even want to think about. But the snake moves, hesitant at first, stretching out so the heat isn't bunched up around it. Then I crack the front door farther, and after a few minutes, it noses in that direction, tongue flickering. I see the inside of its mouth, the gummy white cave. Go on now, I say, and it shudders along, its head out the door before the long line of its body bobbing between the patched quilts. I wait until it's disappeared completely, then a few more seconds. I stick my head out the door, and for once the world is cooler by comparison. There's nothing on the porch, nothing weaving down the stairs. The grasses above the marsh in the distance wave back and forth, whether from wind or from something farther away, I can't tell. I stand there a long time, feeling my skin relax, my dress dry with my sweat. When I go back into the kitchen, Mama is easing herself off the chair, one leg down, then the other. She turns to me, her eyes scanning my ankles. Nothing bit me, I say, but we're gonna have to wash this dress. Let me see you, Mama says, and I let her spin me around, our stomachs brushing when she stops. You got lucky. You should have done as I asked. Mama, I'm not going anywhere, I say. I'm not going to live with one of them. She doesn't take her hands from my shoulders. She studies my face and her nostrils are flaring and I can see something pulsing in her neck. I'm not going, I say. I'm just not. She doesn't say anything. I move her to another chair where she places her arms on the table, slow and unsure. You're upset, I say. Don't go getting upset. I turn to the stove and dampen the fire. Then I put on some tea. I swipe ginger from the cupboard and press into it with a knife. The sharp, sweet smell burns my nose a little. All right now, I say, you sit there. Through the back window, there's no light in the other houses, only the moon like someone's erased a hole into the sky. The tea steams up, and the air in the kitchen is so unbearable that I blow out the lamps and open the windows again. It's just that I've made something happen in this place, or that here is where kind things happen to me. I turn back to my mother, placing the tea before her. She stares down into it. I drink mine, imagining us sitting at this table months from now, 2 bundles in our arms, talking over whatever we have boiled or brewed or made. We'll lay our babies down in 2 cribs side by side, wherever we found room. I'll wrap my fingers around Mama's wrist. I'll say, here, now isn't this better? Thank you.
I can't believe that story is the oldest one in this book. That is amazing. When I describe the stories in this book to people, I always call that one the Zora Neale Hurston one. Oh. That's incredible. I wondered, actually, I have kind of a trivial question and a more serious question. My trivial question is Twyla named for the character in Toni Morrison's Recitative? Right, one of the 2 girls is named Twyla. And my more serious question is about home and nature. You said that home was a big theme in the book. But I couldn't help noticing that in every one of these stories, you have this really careful attention to nature and these really gorgeous natural images, like the picture of the writing that the cottonmouths are making in the dust. And I wondered what the relationship is for you between nature and home.
Okay, thank you. So the first question is about, is Twyla named after Toni Morrison's character? And she's not. I wanted a name that sounded like between, and Twyla literally means twilight because the entire span of the story is during the pregnancy. So it's, yeah, you don't get the aftermath of her giving birth, so that's why her name is Twyla. And that's better than Tweenie, which was a name that I once had. Yeah, so it's Twyla. And the second question, if I'm remembering correctly, is about nature and home. I have horrible seasonal allergies, so I don't know if I associate nature with home specifically, but setting is very important to me as a writer. And so it is very important for me for these stories to have texture, and so that involved researching a lot of the flora and fauna that are specific to those areas and incorporating them in the story so that that setting feels a little richer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, that was wonderful. All of your stories are very specific in their settings. Mm-hmm. So as a writer, what comes first for you? Is it setting? Is it story? Is it character? Where do you start?
Yeah, thank you. The question was, as a writer, what comes first for me? Setting, character, any other factor. And for me, it's emotion, actually. None of my work is autobiographical, really, but my characters are part of me in the sense that whatever they're wrestling with emotionally is something I have wrestled with emotionally at one point in time, even if our direct experiences aren't the same. So in Twyla's case, this is a story that's really about very young girls looking up to the women in their lives. It's an experience that I've had. And so the flip side of having very strong women as mentors is, if you're a girl and you try to emulate that, is that a version of growing up too fast or trying to be a woman too quickly? And so that's Twyla's emotional question, and that came first for me. And what's interesting about Cottonmouth in particular as it relates to the setting is that a lot more of the history about the construction of the Naples Depot and the Black residents who assisted with that and who lived in the area, a lot of that data wasn't available, at least to me, 11 years ago when I first started writing this story. So for Cottonmouths in particular, I actually held off on deciding a setting for a long time because nothing was really making sense. So for instance, at the end of the story where Twyla sort of makes that, railway, for lack of a better word, with quilts, she did that before I knew her dad worked for a railroad. And so that detail was in the story, and I was like, why is she doing that? Where has that come from? And then later I happened to read an article about the Naples area during that time, and I was like, oh, this is the setting I've been looking for. So that was that case, but each story I think has its different journey.
I read an interview that you said that you have little invisible rules for yourself.
Yeah.
And one of them was that you put color in the first paragraph to ground you. So then I had to go reread, the beginning of every story to find it, which was fun. Can you tell us another invisible rule or something that you'd like to do?
I have, let me think. I've come up with so many over time, but I'm trying to think of what I can say concisely. That no one can die unless their death has been earned is one. So if there's going to be some sort of background violence that has harmed someone, that character has to have like a full life and feel like a character whose details have been fleshed out. And no one's death can be historical context, if that makes sense. Like I find with the way that I try to incorporate historical truths in my work, I don't want that to come at the expense of even my fictional characters, and I don't want to replicate violence on the page, so that's one rule that I have for myself.
Any last questions?
I'll ask one. Carrie, your stories really convey the kind of ambiguity that home can be. And, I love the quote you have in your first story from Leela's granddaddy who says when he's watching her get married, no easy journey, so you better do it on purpose. I'd love to hear you talk a little about that ambiguity of when you title something, Make Your Way Home, that it's like, you're gonna find the good and the bad there. Talk a little about that.
Yeah, I think the question was about the ambiguity of home in my work and maybe some of the balance of good and bad that comes with that journey of looking for home. And I think it's because I really have an obsession with happy endings and happiness despite the turmoil that my characters experience sometimes. And I feel like in order for me as a person, I don't know what this says, to really trust happiness, it has to feel like it's earned or that I've grappled with something or wrestled with something or survived something so that happiness feels more stable. And so that's what all my characters are doing. So I feel like I can't call something home for any of those individual characters if I haven't acknowledged how hard home can be or how they might have experienced harm in those places, but then they can come back and heal from it or work with other people around it, and then it becomes like more of a sanctuary, but only after the truth has been acknowledged. So that's what I feel like I'm trying to work through. All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Carrie, and thank you to Robert and Olivia. Professor T.K. Lee, Chris Lee is going to come up and introduce the Ephemera prizes.
Each year, the Eudora Welty Writers Symposium awards the Ephemera Prizes, which recognize and celebrate exceptional high school students' creative writing talents across several genres, the short story, the poem, the essay. The prizes are named in honor of both the W alum Eudora Welty and the W's first creative writing journal, which was aptly named the Ephemera. The winners receive $200, a professional certificate, and they are published in an online anthology. The top 5 winners are then invited to share their work here at the symposium. And honorable mentions are also recognized with professional certificates. Our judges for this year had quite the challenge before them in choosing top honors, so our hats off to our judges, Carrie R. Moore and Olivia Clare Friedman, who you both just heard this afternoon. So thank you. So I will call for the honorable mentions. They will come up and receive their certificates and take a bow, and then I will call up the top winners who will then read and share with you their entries, and then I will give them the money after they do that. The two honorable mentions for this year were Stephanie Hartman for their story Doll and Harper Hip for their poem That Early September Evening. So if you are here and can come up to the stage. All right, next we will start with the five winners this year for the Ephemera prizes. I'll call them out alphabetically, starting with Colin Chung for their story, Raindrops.
Raindrops. I gingerly tugged the regalio from the soil, smelling the sweet honey collected in its cupped petals. With them, if I brought back a full basket, the next morning I'd be greeted with a plate piled high with regalio fritters. I'm still trying to figure out how you got them so crispy. I leave the regalio half pulled from its roots and continue trudging along the dirt path. The forest is quiet today. All I hear is a gentle wind whispering between the oak leaves and the rumbling ribbit of a devil frog. As I cross into the marsh, I can feel my boots filling with water and algae seeping between my toes. Duckweed clings to my waist. Farther in, I'm careful not to get caught between the tangles of black kudzu. The moment they latch onto you, they don't let go. Wading out from the kudzu groves, my feet plant onto half-sunken planks of rotting wood. I feel a tug in my chest. Me and you built a pier across the marsh 2 summers ago. I remember we would haul willow branches from morning to noon, making up songs to pass the time. Even if it rains tomorrow, you're the one I'll always follow, we'd sing to each other. When we finished the pier, we sat together on the edge and let our feet skim the water below. We let crickets do the singing. Do you think it's going to last the flooding season? I asked, drawing ripples with a twig. Yeah, as long as you're here to fix it with me, you said, your eyes meeting mine. I clamber over the slimy remains of the pier and back onto solid earth. Leaves twirl past my face. The trees are shedding their summer coat. The season is almost over. The growl of thunder reminds me that I don't have much time, so I quicken my pace. I can barely make out the dilapidated roof of Tom's cabin through the dark of the woods. Do you remember the first harvest festival? He brought us fried lotus root and catfish. The next morning, he taught us how to weave fishing line out of the cattails nearby. Cross them over just like that, he said as his roughed hands gently thread the stalks. Like the others, Tom left last year. The rain's only getting worse and worse, he told me, before loading the last of his bags onto his truck. A cold drop of water plops onto my nose. Soon enough, torrents of rain are lashing across my skin, and the wind is screaming into my ears, but I can't turn back yet. I begin running down the path, soft dirt mashing beneath my boots. As I reach the end of the trail, my foot slips on wet grass, and I fly forward. My body tumbles down a hill, and I slam face first onto the ground, the thick smell of blood, rain, and regalio surrounding me. When I finally push myself up, there it is before me, a frail apple tree sapling, clinging to the soil. You planted it the day we first moved in. When this tree grows up, we'll be eating apple pie for months, you said that day, patting the soil. Yeah, 10 years from now, I laughed. Are you not going to be here by then? No, I'll still be here too. So how long do you think you're going to be here? I can't see anything anymore, but maybe it's because of the rain or the tears, or maybe it's all the same thing. All I can feel is the torrent speeding down on my skull and cold water climbing above my knees. Soon it's going to cover my entire body, for as long as you stay. I hope the water carries me back to you. Thank you.
All right, next is Jake Heisler for their essay, Little Guatemala, the City Inside Los Angeles.
There's a word that haunted my Los Angeles family visit. It followed me to every corner of every building on every street in the vast city of angels. It was in the Griffith Observatory telescopes, embedded in the Venice Beach sand, and flowed through the Santa Monica Pier's sea salty air. Hola. Hola was the first word I heard when my abuelita and I were picked up from LAX by our Guatemalan relatives, Tia Clelia and my cousins Jackie and Sofia. Immediately, everyone jumped into fervent Spanish conversation, leaving me stranded in a sea of incomprehensible words and unshareable stories. From that point, the evil omen of hola lingered throughout the trip. It began all the conversations that left me isolated and excluded. The language barrier strained my relationship with my family. I removed myself as much as I could while staying in a small apartment with 6 other relatives, because the barrier separating us stood unwavering. However, no matter how much I distanced myself, there was no getting out of a quince. After a 2-hour drive in a fully packed car on the scorching LA highways, my family and I finally arrived at our next summer vacation destination, a quinceañera for a cousin I had never met. We walked into the angelic venue, decadent blue velvet tablecloths draped over each table, glass wine chalices that shimmered like crystals, and a stunning flower arch composed of blue tulips. For a moment, I was optimistic about what the night could hold. Then, it crept into my ear, staining the once enchanting decor. Hola! Carmen, the quince girl's sister, rushed over in a silky dress, the same deep blue as the decor. Her eyes stared in expectation of a response. Her head tilted slightly to the side, the way people do when they have just initiated a conversation. Her feet were firmly planted in front of mine. Her whole figure hung with anticipation of my Spanish reply. I could give none. So, my eyes avoided making contact, darting around from my abuelita. My head hung firmly down, my feet turned away, ready to leave at the first chance, but I had no out. I responded weakly. Hi, sorry, I don't speak any Spanish. Her neatly threaded brows furrowed. Her mind was prepared for Spanish, not English. Her mental gears slid from their Spanish placement, finding the nooks and crannies of English comprehension. Once they had found their place, her brows unknitted and shot up in understanding. She awkwardly returned, "Oh, that is okay," in a thick Guatemalan accent and an atypical cadence and stress pattern for speaking English. Now, she was the one with darting eyes looking for an out. She unplanted her feet and angled them out in the opposite direction from mine. Her head bobbed up, trying to look over me, and to the side, looking for someone the same way I was looking for my abuelita. She found her sister and gave me an "I have to go look," an uncomfortable nod and smile, and a "nice to meet you" arm pat. I felt like an outsider looking in, bound by my monolingualism like chains. I returned to my table, and I was content with staying there away from everyone the rest of the night. It wasn't until the music started that I felt something more. Los Tigres del Norte, a popular band among my relatives, came on, and my abuelita rushed onto the dance floor. Her enthusiasm skyrocketed as she danced to her favorite Guatemalan songs with people who understood her language and culture. I had never seen her happier. As a forced observer, I had the opportunity to notice interactions that could only happen in an environment this magical, this Guatemalan. Whether it was my cousin Jackie happily chattering in Spanish, or my tia's face lighting up when she saw an old friend from Guatemala, it all made me realize how lucky I was to be in that moment. I stood absorbing the energy. My mind filtered out the foreign Spanish being spoken by my relatives and sung by the band, instead focusing on the universal elements of laughter and conversations and the rhythm of the music. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to dance. Hola had separated me because I let it. Embracing this moment, my trip, family, and culture suddenly became vital. With this new perspective came a deep desire to join the lifelong memories and culture I saw others creating and partaking in. I walked into the dance floor as aquí mando yo by los siglos del norte electrified my relatives and even me now too. I greeted my abuelita with that once bitter omen, now a catalyst for hope and change. Hola, abuelita. Her eyes lit up and I smiled. Now, as I've returned home to rural Mississippi, the sights have surely changed. The city of angels has become the worthless penny city, the literal definition of Picayune, my hometown. I've taken hola with me though. I've enrolled in Spanish and supplemented my classes with teachings from my abuelita. I hold simple conversations with her, and I've learned enough to call my Guatemalan family in Spanish. As my Spanish improves, I'm breaking down the wall that divided me from my family, unlocking the shackles that held me back from my culture. Hola doesn't halt me anymore. It blesses me with belonging, starting the conversations and pathway leading me to familial and cultural connection. Thank you.
Next is Anthony Nguyen for their poem Foreign Policy.
The coppery, putrid stench of a decapitated pig's head and poultry locked in rusty cages blended with the sweet, floral aroma of rambutan and durian. The markets that my mother and I roamed shaped the centerpiece of my fleeting memories of Vietnam. A kaleidoscope of smells, sights, and people. It's a stark contrast to the kudzu-laced, clean-aired, cicada-serenaded stillness of Mississippi. And as we were deemed Americans, the overwhelming neon lights, scooter horns, and demands of street vendors and their clients became just that, a memory. Section 2, Sai, gone. Born only 157 days after Saigon caved under the boot of the North Vietnamese army, my mother would be pressured to marry right into adulthood. At the age of 22, she would have her first child, and to this day, raising them would be the center of her life. Seeking the American dream, she immigrated to the US. In Vietnam, she had carved a name for herself as a journalist. However, America had her ambitions bent towards survival. Her master's in journalism meant little in America, where she solely spoke Vietnamese. 5 years of work became a dead end, so the best way out was a job at a nail salon. It was an easy choice. Only 1 year of training, consistent income, and most importantly, it fits her. Her small hands could masterfully display arcs of gradients and pinstripes. Her fixation on precision sharpened the details of each subsequent nail. And an Asian immigrant commitment to hard work allowed for quiet, fleeting masterpieces, lasting only until her next client's appointment. However, demonstrative of her pride, survival, and the country that raised her for 32 years. Section 3, Foreign Policy. I, in turn, was born just 277 days following her immigration. I couldn't understand what my mother saw in me. She expected obedience, humility, and stability. I chased ambition, expression, and risk. My attempt to conform to her mold wasn't perfect, and to her, every misstep was a betrayal of what she sacrificed. She would chastise me in her broken English. To my love of music, she says, "Waste time, no money to leave Mississippi." To my efforts to tutor, "They can teach themselves. They take advantage of you." To my desire for hair longer than her spiky centimeter-short buzz standard for an Asian boy, "You look unnatural, nobody desire." I felt suffocated. Every attempt at a sense of individuality was crushed and twisted into uniformity. To her, risk wasn't a possibility, it was peril, a foreign policy I couldn't understand. Section 4, Reproach, Resilience. Acetone's sweet sting the whirring of nail drills, and rows of flickering fluorescents. These defined my mother's new Vietnam. They became the backdrop of my life, shaping me in ways I was too young and too stubborn to understand. But beneath every scolding was the quiet chaos of a woman who bleached her hands with acetone so mine could hold a pen, a calculator, a trombone slide. What I read as reproach was love in work clothes. For she is the reason for all of these students I tutored, all the problems I modeled, and all the etudes I played. My dedication is a refit of hers, the audacity to bend my future towards my ambitions, not in defiance of my mother, but for her. Section 5, Frontier. Each nail she painted was fleeting, but the resilience behind them was carved into me. Juggling differential equations, outreach programs, and 14-hour math modeling marathons, what once felt impossible felt routine. No matter how much the boots wants me to cave, I keep putting one foot in front of the other until tomorrow comes. There will always be tomorrow, and many after that. In those tomorrows, I will return the security, pride, and resilience that my mother always saw in me, her back hunched under the fluorescence, scraping acrylic dust and dead skin, her 410 frame shaking under the weight of 8 gallons of chemicals. I can't let those sacrifices be for nothing, for I'd be damned if it was. Her sacrifices matter, and I'm making them something bigger, not just for us, but for others. With the time we have left together, I want her to see the fruits of her labor, proof that her trials built a life worth living. That proof extends beyond me. It's in the community I built through outreach programs and math competitions, and in the peers I've inspired to keep going, even when derivatives and integrals feel impossible. And just as she taught me persistence, I want her to see how far I can reach, from wrangling code in MATLAB and Simulink to building rockets and aircraft that lift from their runways and launch pads. What began in restless Saigon and lingered in Mississippi's stillness became my mother's survival. And it's what I had to lovingly defy to carry her legacy forward in outreach, in mathematics, and in the sky. Thank you.
All right. Next up is Ryan Way for their essay, Finding My Voice.
Finding my voice. Wooden wheels rattle on the stone, each brick jutting out or sinking slightly, making the cart dance under its own weight. Yeye Nanai, 糯米糕车来了. Grandma, Grandpa, the sticky cake cart is coming. My first voice was completely Mandarin. It sounded like sweet rice cakes, their steams blending with the salty sea air of my grandparents' little fishing town. The voice felt like belonging. That was the only voice I knew. 妈妈，我听不懂他们在说什么。Mom, I don't understand what they're saying. Kindergarten, New Jersey, and the weight of my parents' expectations felt like if I were Atlas holding up the sky. English crashed into me, loud, cold, and swallowing. I was drowning. I clung to their phrases like life rafts, mimicking their mannerisms, their voice, and their words. Even if I was a target. The more I copied, the more I felt those sweet rice cakes and the salty sea air slip away. New York was sharp, brash, and quick. Why do you say your R's so weird? You even American? Each comment lingered after another. They would circle me, taunting. Want to fight? I fought that day, not out of anger, but in defense, struggling for a voice that felt like mine. Mississippi was slow, relaxed, almost sticky sweet. Y'all listen up, meet your new classmate. I looked at the rows of kids, all eerily alike, yet I stood out. I adjusted again to be like the rest, flattening my edges, softening my tone, tugging away my Mandarin like a possession I was afraid of. But then one voice cut through them all. You know, Ryan, you're like a banana. You're yellow, but you act so white. I laughed, but each breath felt like a betrayal of myself. Years of trying to prove both my Asianness and my Americanness left me drained, like I was folding myself to fit into a box that wasn't my own. For a long time, I thought choosing a voice meant making a choice. English or Mandarin, Northern or Southern, Asian or American. Always halves, never whole. I felt like that stone road in China, not smooth or straight, each bump and crack marking a voice I'd gained. Then came the locker room, the rattle of helmets, the sour stink of sweat, pads thudding to some imaginary beat. Then the coach's speech. It's Friday night lights, first game of the year, and a desire to prove something. He growled, "You're all brothers. On that field, you will die for each other." Words that should have been terrifying had brought me solace. The banter, the echoes of my Mandarin, my half-faded northern edge, and my not-quite southern drawl. All of it flowed together, unrestrained. But in that moment, none of it mattered. What mattered was reading the play, shedding the block, and being there for the team. My voices weren't clashing anymore. They were harmonizing. Looking back, I'd stopped thinking of my changes as losses. I wasn't splitting myself to belong. I was adding another facet to myself, multiplying. New Jersey didn't erase China. Mississippi didn't overwrite New York. And I didn't lose my voice. I built it. I later stumbled across Speaking in Tongues by Zadie Smith, and I'd found myself within those words. The ones that described not choosing, hiding one voice for another, but using them all. Smith called this multiplicity. I called it survival, forging my identity. And now I carry them all. The locker room banter that created an enveloping worth. The southern drawl that slowly curled my vowels. The jeers that made me reconsider my identity. And the sweet cake that clashed with the salty air. I'm ready for my next voice, a professor's wisdom, a friend's advice from across the world, or a new language. Each voice will not replace the others, but it will join them, expanding the voice that shapes me, and I can't wait to hear it.
And lastly, Althea Wells for their poem, To Understand Who.
To understand who, you have to know where the glass of church windows is just as segmented and stained as the soul shouting, "Bless it." Where one can go from the flat of Gaia's mid-back to the round of every vertebra and find rest between her shoulder blades from Silver City to Yazoo. Where souls kick up earth fertilized with the rot of strange fruit. Where the family pulls its branches back in, children of the trunk returning to the roots choked by kudzu. Where Mimi has fixed breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for 50 years, with little thanks but the monotonous rhythm of the grinding and gnashing of teeth. Where Ma proclaims, "I'm not finna be cooking for your daddy like that," and laughs like sunbeams while rain fills the potholes. Where it's undeniable, a beautiful, terrible thing shaping from clay blackness.
Let's have one more round of applause for all of our writers. And since we are kindly sparing them a Q&A, that concludes our Friday sessions. And so ends today, and we will have one more, our third and final session tomorrow morning, starting at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.